Okay, we're back, ready to complete our discussion on the Protista. So up to this point, you should be knowledgeable on the idea of what is a protist, right? It's this some sort of eukaryotic organism. Aside from that, there's so much diversity on size, on the way that they move, on how they acquire their nutrition. So we know the protozoans were the animal-like sort of mobile flagellate, ciliate, sarcodine, apicomplexan category. Now we progress to another type of protist that we call the algae. So algae are the plant-like sort of protists. They're the ones that are going to be photosynthetic. And some look not very plant-like. Up here, some look very plant-like. But taxonomically speaking, they are not considered to be plants. There's several different types of algae. We're only going to look at four, right? The diatoms, the dinoflagellates, brown algae, and the green algae. So picture this, right? You are a single-celled photosynthetic organism swimming around in the ocean, right? So you're aquatic, you're marine, saltwater, freshwater, right? So in lakes or streams or the ocean. If you're photosynthetic, you tend to be very low on the food chain, right? So a lot of things are able to consume you. Right? So one strategy that these diatoms use is they make us a protective cell wall. But understand if you're going to be having a cell wall, that cell wall must allow some way, somehow, the light to penetrate into the chloroplast. Into the photosynthetic tissue, basically, or I should say photosynthetic organelles, because they're not considered tissue, they're single cell, right? So what they have done, they've come up with a clear type of cell wall coating that is made up of silica. It's basically glass. If you ever looked at the beach sand, it's got the little clear little grains. That is basically silica. So these single-celled diatoms utilize this glass, the silica cell wall, for protection and for the transmission of light as well. A lot of different species of diatoms, right? So they come in different shapes, sizes. Some look like circular, some look like little surfboards, little croissants of some sort, little spaceships. Just again, tremendous amount of diversity of diatoms, but they're all again using glass as a protective cell wall and being able to photosynthesize. So important role, important members of the sort of aquatic community here. So we don't live near an ocean here in El Paso, right? But we do benefit from diatoms, maybe directly, maybe indirectly. But if you are analyzing basically the diatoms, right? They live in the ocean, and over time, these little single-celled organisms die, and their little shells, their little glass shells, sink to the bottom of the ocean. Once they sink to the bottom of the ocean, there's a lot of pressure, so this glass little cell wall basically is compressed, and over time, over millennia, it literally forms a type of soil. Right? And that soil is called Diatomaceous Earth. So Diatomaceous Earth, basically, we analyze this as a famous landmark in England, the Cliffs of Dover. It looks like white rock, but that is not rock. It's basically Diatomaceous Earth. This, at some point, was at the bottom of the ocean, and because of tectonic movement, this thing was pushed up. So what was once the bottom of the ocean, which is comprised of glass, basically, now is exposed. And this diatomaceous earth can be harvested, and it can be utilized as filters, right? So we can use it for filtration of water, for filtration of like swimming pools, of drinking water, for water parks. So this shows a regular sand filter, right? The sand filter shows sand. So sand basically is the filtration unit that's used a lot here in El Paso. If you have a swimming pool, it's cheap. There's a lot of sand. It's everywhere. But the grains are a little bit large compared to the diatomaceous earth. So the diatomaceous earth grains are much smaller, which make them more expensive, but a much better type of filter. So if you want better filtration, go with these DE filters, diatomaceous earth filters, for swimming pools, for water parks, for anywhere that you need really, really good filtration. So again, these crystal clear aquarium are kept so clean with these diatomaceous earth filters. Water parks, different types of drinking water filtration, all kept very clean with the basically these DE filters. DE filter or DE, diatomaceous earth, can also be utilized as pesticides, as a sort of eco-friendly type of pesticides. Instead of killing bugs with these nasty organophosphate type of pesticides, so we are looking now at sprinkling this powder, this diatomaceous earth powder, and that powder then sort of clogs their airways. So this becomes a how should we say, a location problem. It's non-toxic for us. We don't breathe the same way the insects do, but it would be toxic for them, these insects, as it clogs their airway. Right? So it it's not conducive to their type of survival. So another category of the protists, the algae, would be our dinoflagellates. So dinoflagellates are quite interesting, right? They have an interesting biology. They are associated with red tides. They're marine, they live in salt water. They are capable of releasing neurotoxins. So the neurotoxins are pretty potent. We're going to call saxitoxins that can have biological significance. And quite unique in the biological world, they are also bioluminescent. So they make their own light. So interesting aspects for these dinoflagellates. And there's a microscopic view of a single dinoflagellate. Again, multiple species under this category. So what is a red tide? So a red tide would be this accumulation, this population explosion of these little single-celled dinoflagellates. And from an aerial view, we can see the water looks red, right? That's why they call it a red tide. That's what has biological significance with these groups. So the red tides are basically, again, perfect conditions. The water temperature is just right, salinity is just right, turbidity is just right, everything, the current, whatever, everything is just perfect. And these dinoflagellates reproduce, and they continue to reproduce. And they reproduce so much that they change the color of the water to red. Right, so big explosion in their population. Now, as we mentioned, they do release neurotoxins. So you have all of these dinoflagellates where there's maybe just a tiny bit of that's released by each one, but now you have millions and billions and trillions of these things. It can become significant. As the neurotoxin accumulates in the water, it can be harmful to fish, to shellfish, to creatures that live in that area. So fish, if they linger in the area, can potentially die, can be fatal to fish. Other species typically goes away, kind of seeks a new environment, new habitat away from the red tide. And the red tides can persist for a little while. They can linger on for a couple of days. It depends on the conditions of that local environment there. The actual toxins themselves, I thought this was an interesting statistic. The saxitoxins are, again, neurotoxins which injure nerves, marine life, and feed on dinoflagellates. So if you were to eat sushi, maybe that came from a red tide area, if you were to eat oysters, like raw oysters without being processed, that absorb some of these saxitoxins. Again, this statistic is quite interesting. Saxitoxins, these neurotoxins, are 10,000 times more potent than cocaine. So it really overstimulates the neurons, and they just fire and fire and fire and fire. And basically, if you can envision like a nerve that basically, or a wire that just is flooded with so much electrical signal that it fries, right? There's so much release of neurotoxin, it depletes the system. And again, this can become fatal. So humans can get poisoned by eating the raw fish that comes from the red tide area, or from eating shellfish that comes from the red tide area. So be aware if you eat anything raw from the ocean. There's a lot of junk that accumulates in the ocean. So just be aware. I don't want to mess up stuff for you all, but just think logically of where your food is coming from. How is it being treated? How is it being transported? Since we don't live near like an ocean, so any of this oceanic food source has to be shipped a long way, right? And if we don't know maybe where it was collected, we don't know the conditions of sort of that source, again, you just got to be aware. If that saxitoxin is cooked, that toxin becomes denatured and it's not harmful to the body. So just be aware. Now, again, another interesting aspect of the dinoflagellates is that they bioluminesce. They sort of emit their little natural form of light. So here you see maybe the waves crashing at night, the tide coming in, the waves coming in, this person sort of splashing around in the water, and all that would generate then this sort of fluorescent light. So pretty neat. Not many species of animals can do this, can generate their own light source. All right, so diatoms, dinoflagellates, and now we progress to a more common form of algae that we call the brown algae. I don't know if you've had the experience of going out to the Pacific coast, out the California coast, that water, that very cold water, right? But washed up on the shore, we see a lot of these strands of seaweed. And what you consider seaweed is this type of brown algae that thrives in cold water. It basically has an important role, an important ecological role in that sort of Pacific coast area. If you're a type of algae, you don't have roots, right? You have basically an attachment point, an attachment sort of adherence area, and you secrete this type of glue, this type of alginic acid that holds the algae to the ocean floor, to the rocks, to the reef, whatever the case is. And it allows then that algae to grow up towards the light. The algae is sustained, its plant, I should not say plant, its algae body is sustained by the buoyancy of the water. Right? So it's buoyant, it just kind of floats around in the water. Now, humans have found different uses for this alginic acid and for the actual algae itself. If I backtrack, if you notice the sushi wrap, a lot of times sushi is wrapped in this seaweed, in these sheets of brown algae. So brown algae can be utilized as a food source. It can also be utilized as a source for alginic acid. And alginic acid, again, being a part of glue, it helps to adhere. Alginic acid is also part of the agar plates where you culture bacteria. So it helps the agar adhere to the little plate. Alginic acid is an important emulsifier of ice cream. If you've ever gone to, let's see, Dairy Queen, you ordered a Blizzard. They don't just give you the Blizzard, they turn the Blizzard upside down. Like, no, it's gonna fall. No, it's not, because it has alginic acid and it keeps that ice cream kind of sort of emulsified together there. And also alginic acid is found in cosmetics. When you put cosmetics, you want the cosmetics to adhere to the face, right? So when the cosmetics are adhering to the face, they basically will not fall, right? It kind of keeps the lipstick in place, and it will keep the cosmetics in place as well. So who knew, right? Brown algae making the world a better place by producing ice cream, helping us learn about microbiology, and making the world a more beautiful place with cosmetics, right? So important roles of alginic acid. Then we look at kelp, or the particular type of brown algae. Macrocystis would be the genus name. So Macrocystis is the largest of the Protist category. So this thing is up in excess of 60 meters, right? 60 meters is a big algae, right? It's a more than half a football field in length. So again, we find these in the Pacific coast. And ecologically speaking, they're significant because they form literally underwater forests. So if you don't have a lot of vegetation in the underwater community, there's not a lot of hiding places, hiding spots for little fish. Without a lot of little fish, we cannot sustain bigger fish, mammals, different types of upper level predators in that environment. So by producing now habitat, places to reproduce, places to hide, these kelp forests are the fundamental sort of basis for a lot of these Pacific ecosystems there, the underwater ecosystems. So again, it literally looks like you're in a forest, right? There's all these, we don't say plants, they're not really plants, but all these algae there that provide a neat ecosystem there. So if you do make your way out at some point in, later in the future, go to the beach, go to the Pacific coast, go to Disneyland, and then go to the coast when you have time, right? And try to see some of these up close and in person. It's a really neat ecosystem. Bring some warm stuff, maybe a wetsuit or something, but it's a very dynamic ecosystem out there. And lastly, we get into our not as dramatic as the brown algae, but much closer to home, which are green algae. So the green algae are the freshwater inhabitants, right? So they're the ones that are going to live in your aquariums, in lakes and streams, freshwater lakes and streams, in non-chlorinated swimming pools. So these are the types of algae that are slimy that you may have known, you're familiar with. They're common, right? So they're not harmful in any way. They're photosynthesizing, but people don't like to see their swimming pool green, right? They don't like to see their aquariums green. They want crystal clear water into which to swim. So again, just a different type of algae. Microscopically, there's volvox. Microscopically, there's Spirogyra. So common forms of green algae. And again, that concludes in our discussion on the algae. And very, very quickly, let me cover then the slime molds, the weirdest category of Protista. So these protists, these slime molds are going to be saprobic decomposers. So they have to sort of ooze and crawl onto whatever's dead, whatever they can then sort of adhere to. So here we find in a forest, if you roll the log over, you'll find it all covered in slime mold. And these are not common in El Paso. It's too hot, too dry. The desert region is not conducive for slime molds to survive. They have to be found in moist, humid, cooler types of climates, right, for slime molds. And they basically look like colorful silly string, like where somebody sprayed that silly string all over the place. They're slimy, like slime, right? You've seen kids make slime. That's kind of what it looks like. It's a weird organism, right? So not a lot more to discuss on slime molds. And again, that concludes our discussion on the protists, on the protozoans, the algae, and the slime molds. Right? So look for these videos, and I'll continue uploading. Next, we get into plants, animals, and we'll continue onwards from there. Right? So y'all have a good rest of your day, and I'll see you next time.